Hello, welcome to the final week of the Storybook Test Bootcamp. This time I have a guest with me. I have Yann Braga. He is one of the core maintainers of Storybook who's worked a lot on the features that we've been covering over the past few weeks. And so I thought it'd be fun to have him on and just kind of have a more conversational overview of everything that we've covered. And then I especially want to highlight what is coming in Storybook 9 and how those changes are a direct result of your feedback that you've given as part of this program. So thank you for
Hey
that.
there.
And Jan, you want to say hi?
Yeah, happy to be here. Really curious about what people think about the changes we made, and I think we made a lot of improvements. Looking forward to hearing feedback.
All right. Thanks, Jan. So before we get into those changes, I just want to give kind of like a review of everything that we've been covering. And so Storybook Test is a way to test your components directly inside of Storybook. And so kind of the central feature is this test widget here down in the bottom of the Storybook sidebar. And when you run test, you'll get status indicators. You'll get status indicators for the stories. And then you're able to debug those tests using these dedicated panels. So like we've got it for component tests, you'll have it for accessibility or visual tests, and I'll cover that in more detail in just a second. And then there's some key concepts that we had to cover first. So like watch mode. That's what enables the test to automatically rerun whenever you make changes to either the component or the story or any like associated like style files. It's a great way to work locally so that your tests are always running for you, kind of in the background, and then your any failures will surface themselves quickly. We also talked about how to run these tests in CI, and because Storybook Test is built on top of VTest, you do that just by running VTest in your CI environment. Um, just a quick review. So Storybook Test, the way it functions kind of under the hood is it takes your Storybook stories and transforms them using a Vite plugin into real VTest tests. And then those are run in VTest browser mode using Playwright so that they run in a real browser, usually headless, so that you don't actually see it going on. And then when you do it in the Storybook UI, that same thing is happening. We're just calling it in the command line for you. So that's why you just call VTest in your CI and you get the exact same results. Um, we also talked about coverage. So coverage is really key to know if you're testing your components well and like, well, if you have good coverage of every bit of your component logic. And Storybook Test will calculate coverage for you and you get a summary in the test widget in the sidebar. And then if you click that, you're given an interactive report that you can navigate. We'll walk through that in a little more detail in just a second. And of course, you can generate that coverage in your CI. It's just a simple CLI flag here. So there's a number of types of tests that you can do with Storybook tests. So the most simple is what we call render tests, just kind of like a smoke test for your component. It really just confirms, does this component render without error? If there's an error, the test fails. If there's not, it passes. And then component tests kind of build on that, or really render tests are the most simple type of component test. So a component test will render a component in a real browser that gives you high fidelity. So like in contrast, it's not rendering it in a simulated browser where you have to worry about mocking browser APIs or anything like that. It is in a real browser. So you have full access to those browser APIs. You could simulate a user interacting with the UI just like you can in an end-to-end test, but it only tests a unit or like a single component of that UI, and it can reach into the implementation to mock things or manipulate data, which is more similar to a unit test. So component tests are that like perfect Goldilocks balance between fidelity of an end-to-end and control and speed of a unit test. And so they look something like this, where you've got your story, and then you simulate behavior and make assertions in the play function of the story. So in this case, we've got a dialogue. We click on the button to open that dialogue, and we just assert that that dialogue is actually in the document. And you can do a lot more with a play function, of course. And so this one, and with stories. So this one has some mocked arguments that are passed to the story. We mock the return value of one of those in a before each, and we do our behaviors in the play function, and then expect one of those mocks to have been called with some stuff. This is all detailed in the guides. This is just a really quick overview, but just know that this is kind of the heart and soul of Storybook Test is being able to mock and manipulate and simulate behavior like this. Then we covered visual tests. In Storybook, visual tests are accomplished through the chromatic visual tests add-on. And honestly, like we believe visual tests should be the majority of your UI tests just because you don't have to write a single assertion. It's like getting like 1,000 assertions in one when you take a visual snapshot of your UI. Like you don't have to check, is this color this? Is this border radius this? You just take a snapshot. And then they're so much easier to review as well because they are visual. It's very easy to see differences and know whether or not those are what you should get. And the final type of tests we covered are accessibility tests. And so these run alongside your component tests. And they're just really helpful for helping to ensure that your components can be used by everyone, which with like the ADA and Section 508 and then the European Accessibility Act that's coming in June, this is more and more important from a legal standpoint as well, that you work on the accessibility of your UI. So that's something that we built into Storybook Test, and we're going to show it in the demo right now. So I mentioned that we made some changes since the bootcamp has happened with Storybook 9. Well, we just released Storybook 9's beta release just yesterday. And so that's what we're going to show in the demo. And Yann, you want to take it away?
Sounds good, Kyle. Thanks. So this is Storybook 9 with a lot of interesting changes we're about to show. And I think the most interesting part here is that we have the testing widget, and that has been reworked based on your feedback.
Yeah, probably one of the bigger ones here. Before, to turn on or turn off various features within the testing widget, you had to click a little pencil icon to go into an edit mode. We got a lot of feedback, especially in this bootcamp, that was confusing. And so we just removed that edit mode. And now you can just directly toggle features on and off in the widget without going into any sort of mode. So Yann, you want to turn on accessibility and then run some tests?
Sounds great. So we click on this button and all of the tests are running. And we already see that we got some reports. The tests run really fast, so we already have that finished. So we have 1 interaction failure and 8 accessibility test warnings. On the sidebar here, we see these different icons, so they're indicating what's going on. And specifically here, if we click on the 3 dots or the meatballs icon, then we get this very interesting tooltip, which also has been reworked.
Yeah, we've reworked this to just be specific to what you want to act on. So before is kind of this strange blend of what's here and then what is down like more globally for the whole project. Now it is only pertaining in this case to the calendar component and its stories. And so you want to click on the interactions failure there and we can debug that.
Sounds good. So we are also able to run specific tests if we wanted to. So we clicked on this button to run all the tests, but also as part of this tooltip, we can click here to have this focus mode. By clicking on the interactions failure button, it brings us to the failing story from the interactions, and also the interactions panel is opened. So we see here on the steps what actually has happened. We got a failure mentioning that it's unable to find an accessible element with the role grid cell and the name today. So we are writing a play function to click on an element here in the calendar, but there's no today actually. So it turns out in our play function, we wrote it wrong. So let's just select a specific thing here, like the 14, for instance, and save that. So we fixed the play function, but the sidebar has not been updated. And the reason for that is because our tests have been run manually. So we can click here and then we can click on this button to then update our statuses. And as you can see, the interactions now have passed, but you're also able to use watch mode feature so that the tests are running automatically with your changes. So this way, you actually don't have to necessarily, select specific stories to test. So if we were to call the failure, for instance, go back, the watch mode is rerunning, and therefore you get the interactions failure right here. So if we fix the interactions again, then the interactions are passing. And,
Yeah, and
the other thing.
Jan, what did we do to improve the watch mode in Storybook 9?
Well, watch mode was quite tricky in the beginning. Stories, they were only getting triggered if you made changes. Sorry, the tests were only getting re-triggered once you made changes to the story files. So now the changes, they get triggered on component files, and basically anything that relates to the dependency tree of your file. So if you make a change in a button component and it touches everything, all the related tests are going to happen. And additionally, we also noticed that the preview file in Storybook, which is where you basically do all of your global configuration, was not retriggering the tests. And now it does. So there's a lot of improvements over there. It's much more interesting to use it.
Okay, so it should work a little more as it expects to work. Okay, that's
For
great.
sure.
Could we check out one of those accessibility warnings?
Let's take a look. So over here as well, we have this button for accessibility failures. There is also one at the bottom. So it's really up to you to choose. You can specify like a story, or if you click here, it goes to the very first match. So if we click here, we see that we have a violation on the accessibility panel. And if you noticed from the course, the panel looks very different.
Yeah, so we have completely revamped the accessibility add-on. It now provides a lot more information, and it has some more interactive features. So before it was kind of a static list. Now you can like highlight all of the violations, for example, with that show highlights button. And then you can even jump to the element that's showing that like this particular violation, so we can see it's that one. Or you want to click on one of those elements over in the canvas.
Sound good?
You can also get these tooltips just on the element itself, so you don't have to even necessarily use the add-on panel. You can get what you need in the preview, which is a really nice
Exactly.
framework.
So if you click on it, it will actually bring the element down to the panel to be selected.
Yeah.
And the very interesting thing here is like, well, over here, there's only one element that is violating a specific accessibility rule. If there are multiple, you actually get to see them in a list. And by selecting them, you now have this focused view of maybe what matters at the very moment for you. And if you are not able to fix something because, in this case, the contrast of the colors is not matching. Maybe you can't do that yourself. You need to talk to a designer. So what you can do is like you can click on this button, copy link, and that will provide you a deep link specifically to that story and that particular violation in the storybook panel. So if you were to open that link, which we just copied, it will go through that story and that particular violation being selected. So that is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a really great way to collaborate between developers and designers because oftentimes, like a color contrast one is a perfect example where you as a developer could probably easily pick a hex color that fits the contrast issue that you need, but that may not be what the designer's after. So it's always good to collaborate, and this is a great tool for doing that. And it
Yeah,
works
in this
if
case,
you have a published storybook and you click that copy link, it'll use that published URL. So
exactly. And in this case, what we're seeing here actually turns out that we have a low opacity on our button components. So if we change that to the right one, then the accessibilities are good.
yeah,
And because we have watch mode running, we also have rerun all of the tests in the necessary stories. And if you remember, there were maybe like 8 or 9 failures before. Everything is now passing.
that's great. Um, there was one more thing I wanted to show. Could you go to maybe the primary button story
Sounds
and
good.
then go to the interactions panel? So
All
remember,
right.
the first type of test that we talked about was a render test. But you still debugged that through the interactions panel, and so we added this render story step to every story now, so that it's clear. Um, when it's successful and when it's failing. Just trying to make that experience a little more clear, um,
Of course.
based on
There's
feedback
also
that we
some,
received because people were confused.
yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. The render test, people were like, What is actually being tested?" We used to call it smoke test, which is like a common term that means similar to that, but we felt like rendering makes a lot of sense. It touches with exactly what is happening. Either the component rendered or it didn't. So that's why we show the render story. There's also very interesting improvement. It's not that um, tangible, but it did happen in a big overhaul we did in the internal APIs of Storybook. So the testing widget, as we call it now, it essentially used to store state within the browser session. So if you had some failures here or some passes, you would open in a new tab or maybe the Storybook in a new browser window. You would actually get to lose all of your statuses. They would just be lost. And that was a little frustrating. So we
And
completely revamped things
your
internally.
settings too, right, Jan? Like if you had toggled on accessibility, you'd have to check
Oh
it
yeah,
again.
for sure. So it was a very frustrating experience. So you basically have something set up, you restart Storybook, and then all of a sudden you lose everything. So in this case, now everything is kept and is persistent. The most interesting thing about the change we made is that the statuses, basically, the check marks on the sidebar, the little dots indicators here, they are stored in the server part of Storybook. And that means if you open things in a new tab, everything is kept the way they are. So you don't actually have to have this like mismatch between tabs or any other windows. The other thing is because the statuses are stored in the server, now there is no way to clear them by opening a new tab like it was before. And that's very much intended. So now we introduce a new button right here at the bottom to clear all the statuses. So once you click on that button, it will clear everything to the basic state. And then you can rerun things as you like.
Yeah. And while we were doing that work, it involved a lot of API changes. And so actually, as part of this boot camp, we have some of the members building add-ons to integrate with Storybook Test, which is amazing. And so we worked directly with them to develop APIs that meet their needs and are more straightforward than what we had before, and has all of this status store improvements baked in as well.
Yeah, it's actually quite incredible to see something that we just recently built. And then all of a sudden, we already have a lot of community contributors and people interested in that.
Yeah. So with that, that's the demo for the most part, but that is not all of the improvements. So Jan, you want to talk about how we improved the post-install experience, for example?
Yeah, sounds good. So when you are using the Storybook's VTest add-on, by the way, we actually renamed the add-on. It used to be called Experimental Add-on Test. And to make things more clear, we call it now just add-on VTest. The add-on is out of experimental phase. That's why the experimental name is gone. And we're just making very clear. So the add-on VTest used to have so basically when you want to install add-on VTest in your project, you normally go through the Storybook add command, and then you specify the name of the add-on. Then the command automatically detects things and sets things up for you. It would, install VTest if you didn't have it. It would install Playwright if you didn't have it. It would set up the necessary commands and the necessary code changes. However, when you're using VTest, there are so many different ways of configuring. You might have a vt-config file with a test field. You might have a vtest config file. You might have a vtest projects file or a vtest workspaces file. There are so many different shapes and sizes of things that you can do with VTest, and we didn't cover all of them. So based on the feedback that you all gave, we made sure to cover all of the necessary formats. And now all of that thing is automatically set up in the Storybook add command.
Yeah. Additionally, VTest 3 has come out and stabilized in the time since we've done Storybook Test, and that has a lot of improvements. And so Storybook Test now requires VTest 3. That makes the test a little bit faster, a little bit better. It's a win all around.
Yeah, the other thing which is actually quite big is that before the V-test add-on needed to understand extra things from your project, and that was not automatically done. So if you're using, let's say, Vue 3, or if you're using SvelteKit, you would not only need to set up the plugin for the V-test add-on itself, but also you would need to get the plugins that you use in Storybook for those specific frameworks, like SvelteKit or Vue 3 or Next.js, and you would need to set them up yourself. However, the VTest add-on now automatically detects your main.js file, and that means it will read all of your Vite plugins automatically. It will also read your storage globs, and you don't have to specify pretty much anything anymore because it will be aware of all of your configuration. So all of that is gone. Things are much simpler and much more straightforward now.
Yeah, I think that really sums it up. It all adds up to a much more straightforward, automatic process, especially for people that are just getting started. But if you upgrade, we've done a lot of work for auto migrations to handle all of these changes for you. Like you don't have to care that the package name changed, for example. We will handle that for you. Um, so yeah, that's the overview. That is the wrap up for the boot camp. And I just want to end by saying thank you to everyone that's been a part of this. Thank you to Yann, who's kind of representing the Storybook team here, who's done a lot of work in improving things as a direct result of the feedback that we've gotten in this program. So we really appreciate it. Please continue asking questions in the Discord. Just because the program is ending does not mean we're not still here to help. So it's been great. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Thanks for joining us,
Thank
Jan.
you. Thank you.